Welcome to the Astrological Weather Report, the Astrology of 2020. My name is Daniel Fiverson, and thank you all for tuning in and listening to this forecast. I feel a synchronicity today, actually, speaking on the first anniversary of the Capitol riot. It is another day in U.S. history that will live in infamy. January 6, 2021 was within weeks of the first U.S. Pluto Return, but I'm getting ahead of my story. Sorry. There are two kinds of observable evolution, cataclysmic and continual. Cataclysmic evolution occurs when a multitude of forces culminate at the same time to produce a total metamorphosis of that which was. The result will appear to be a sudden change, but this is not the case. The result is based upon many evolutionary forces converging together, which meet some other resisting force. The resisting force simultaneously represents the present and the past. The evolutionary forces creating cataclysm represent the future as a consequence of the past. When the evolutionary force for change becomes stronger than the resisting force, the result is cataclysmic change. The relative strength of both forces determines the intensity or magnitude of the cataclysm itself. Jeffrey Wolf Green, Pluto, the evolutionary journey of the soul. We stand at the threshold of a new age, an age that is mirrored in the time when Buddha, Confucius, Lao-Tse, and Homer walked on the planet. A golden age shimmers backward through time, from a future to which we are now returning. We may not all live to see it in this lifetime, but we can see it in our mind's eye, and we can go there with our intentions. Our grandchildren and their children will begin to create it. The Pluto and Capricorn generation currently coming onto the planet will build Eckhart Tolle's new Earth. In the meantime, all of us are down here on the ground up to our ankles in alligators. We are the ones we have been waiting for. We have been tasked with healing the cultural toxins that have delivered the consequences of the past that we are experiencing in our present time. Like it or not, it is an inconvenient truth that we all chose to be here now. In 2022, there is only one major outer planet event, the conjunction of Jupiter and Neptune in April. This is in contrast to the trio of outer planet cycles between Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto that activated over the last 2 years. We might think that we're coming out of the storm, but we would be fooling ourselves if we were to let our guard down just yet. Astrology tells us that each of those outer planet conjunctions mark the onset of long cycles of time, 12, 20, and 35 years. We are still in the early stages of these planetary developments. The dynamics that were set in motion 24 months ago and longer began to unfold in 2021 and will continue to move forward as the decades stretch out ahead. The intent of the cataclysms in crisis is to move us forward as individuals and as a planetary community. In the years ahead, we will reach a plateau, we will reach a plateau of safety and stability. We will observe and acknowledge how far we have come, but the stars are saying that this safe haven is still out beyond 2022. I want to tell a story about Eris, a dwarf planet which was only discovered in 2008 out beyond the orbit of Neptune, and a version of her mythology which you might not be familiar with. Homer identified Eris as Enyo, the sister of Eris, the Greek god of war, and dubbed her the goddess of chaos and discord. Hesiod said that her origin is much more ancient, that she was actually the daughter of primordial Nyx, the Greek personification of night. In Theogony, Hesiod writes that the offspring of Eris were named hardship, pains, battles, wars, murders, manslaughters, quarrels, lies, disputes, anarchy, and ruin. Due to her highly elliptical orbit, which is 2 Pluto distances from the sun, the orbital cycle of Eris is over 500 years long. As a result, Eris spends approximately 125 years, or 1/5 of her orbital period, in the sign of Aries. Like all the outer planets, Eris retrogrades once a year. Each year, Eris stations over each point in Aries 4 times, twice retrograde and twice direct. That's 4 times on each point in Aries. A retrograde station is not a reduction, it is an intensification. The retrograde planet drills down on a single degree like the sun's rays focused through a magnifying glass on a leaf until it bursts into flame. When Eris stationed direct in January 2020, COVID emerged. When Eris stationed direct in January 2021, the supporters of Donald Trump stormed the US Capitol. This is just her most recent impact. Historically, her ingress into Aries in 1927 delivered the Wall Street crash, the Great Depression, the rise of fascism, and World War II. The discovery of Eris upended the astronomical and astrological communities alike. Anticipating that more TNOs, or trans-Neptunian objects, would be discovered, the International Astronomical Union redefined the definition of a planet for the first time since Galileo. As a result, Pluto was demoted to dwarf planet status. Many astrologers, including myself, strongly disagree with this decision. This radical event at her discovery is a perfect example of the dynamics of Eris. Eris correlates to the upending of long-standing circumstances, exercising her power to upset or destroy anything that has lived past its expiration date. Her influence emits light as well as shadow. Samuel Hahnemann, who realized homeopathy, Dr. Martin Luther King, and Cesar Chavez all had Eris prominent in their charts. For what it's worth, so did Charles Manson. Eris has been enshrined as culpable for the bloodlust of the Trojan War. At the end of that bitter conflict, all of the mythic heroes of the Trojan War were in the underworld. The Greek classical age had come to an end. The Greek tragedian Euripides suggests that it was Helen, the face that launched 1,000 ships, that was responsible for the slaughter that took place in Ilium. Helen was the wife of Menelaus, king of Sparta, which was a warrior community. Helen was the sister of Castor and Polydeuces, the Gemini twins. She was also an immortal twin. Her mortal sister, Clytemnestra, conspired to murder her husband, Agamemnon, and was in turn murdered by her son, Orestes. Helen willingly agreed to be awarded to Paris and deserted her husband, sparking the conflict, knowing full well the consequences that would ensue from the Spartan warriors. Upon arrival in Troy, she attempted to expose the Greeks hidden within the great wooden horse by taunting them, mimicking the voices of their wives. At the end of the bitter conflict, a member of the Trojan royal family fled to Italy. His name was Aeneas. He was the son of the Trojan prince Anchises and the Greek goddess Aphrodite. Virgil's Aeneid tells of his travels to Italy, where he became the progenitor of Rome. Eris can be credited for founding the Roman Empire, a culture that lasted for over 1,000 years. Roman culture persists to this day in the liturgy, ideology, and mysticism of the Holy Roman Catholic Church. Eris has been the force majeure behind the Capricorn outer planet conjunctions that defined the 2020s. Since 2017, Pluto in Capricorn has been in a last quarter crisis in consciousness square to Eris in Aries. The only other time in recorded history that this particular astrological event occurred was from 695 to 686 BCE during the Axial Age, a term coined by German philosopher Karl Jaspers and brought to our attention by Rick Tarnas in Cosmos and Psyche. During those years, Confucius, Buddha, Lao-Tse, Plato, Homer, Zoroaster, Archimedes, Elijah, and Isaiah were on the planet. Many of the great thought streams of Western civilization emerged in those years. These events and personages are a mirror of our time. The recent transits of Eris and the corresponding historical events are a timeline that reveals the true nature of her effect on human development and explains the chaos and disorder that is producing our current existential angst. Eris is the homeopathic remedy for what ails our world. Eris has exposed centuries and millennia of xenophobia, misogyny, racism, and patriarchal white supremacy. Eris has revealed the inherent frailties of the American electoral system, its inequities, and its vulnerabilities. The last quarter square from Pluto to Eris is the chaotic, discordant, deadly undercurrent of our time. Since the square perfected in 2015, this planetary alignment has delivered COVID, Donald Trump, cataclysmic weather, extreme gun violence, and radical political polarization. Excuse me. At Eris's station direct in January 2022, this year, the Sun and Venus joined Pluto and Capricorn in the last quarter square to Eris. The Sun correlates to how we self-actualize. Egos are amplified, inflated, and aggrandized. Personal values and priorities are altered. People get vertical, feeling artificially self-empowered. Venus corresponds to what is essential, expressed as our personal values and resulting priorities. When events magnetize to the past, the intent is to find resolution and move forward. We grow through crisis, through direct emotional experience. Evolutionary pressures overwhelm the natural emotional resistance to hold on to what is safe and familiar. As Eris stations direct this year, Mars in Sagittarius applies to a disseminating trine to Eris. Mars formats our conscious choices in concert with our personal beliefs, necessities, and soul directives. Sagittarius gets preachy. A radicalization of ideas permeates the zeitgeist. Vesta in Sagittarius separates from a tight disseminating trine to Eris. In the disseminating phase, an integration occurs as a personal sense of purpose needs to find expression through social interaction. Asteroid Vesta correlates to our sacred commitment to ourselves. We are experiencing the collective and personal events that capture and focus our attention on what is essential for our survival and for the survival of the planet in the face of cataclysmic climate change. We are experiencing political radicalization as authoritarianism expands worldwide, eroding democratic institutions. The bottom line is that events are conspiring to raise the consciousness of the planet. The only outer planet event of 2022 occurs on April 12th as Jupiter conjoins Neptune in Pisces. Jupiter and Neptune are the traditional and modern rulers of Pisces. Pisces correlates to higher consciousness and to our connection to the source of all that is. This 15-year cycle will activate global awakening to the issues that threaten our well-being. The conjunction in Pisces will generate emotional experiences that increase human consciousness and compel understanding that we are inexorably connected to that which is greater than ourselves. In medical astrology, Neptune correlates to pandemics and diseases of an unknown origin. The spread of COVID around the world necessitates a more conscious approach to healthcare. Jupiter makes things bigger, but it doesn't necessarily make things better. The pandemic will continue to spread as increasingly potent and infectious variants continue to emerge. As spiritual beings having a human experience, we learn through direct emotional experience. Rarely is it enough to just think about something and make lifestyle changes. The event needs to be visceral and occur in our emotional body in order for real change to occur. The lunar nodes play a significant role in 2022. On January 18th, the lunar nodes ingress Taurus and Scorpio. The lunar nodes are our karmic evolutionary trajectory forward. The lunar nodes trace the pathway through the present from past to future. They hold the imprint of our emotional nature from the past and the soul's intentions for the future, what the soul itself needs in order to evolve. The lunar nodes generate the circumstances that show up as direct emotional experiences. Proximity to the lunar nodes by the luminaries at a new moon or a full moon evokes the remarkable twice yearly breakdown or breakthrough events that we know as eclipses. This happens because the lunar nodes are inexorably connected to our evolutionary growth. Scorpio and its ruling planet Pluto correlate to the soul, the higher self, that part of ourselves that exists outside of time and space. Evolution is not a theory, it's a fact. Pluto is the evolutionary engine that keeps us moving forward, even when we feel like we're moving backward. As Scorpio takes command of the lunar south node, collective shadows are exposed. Karmic processes unfold and generate evolutionary change. Correlating to security-based moon, Cancer, and the fourth house, it is human nature to remain the same and to hold on to what is familiar. Scorpio confronts our natural resistance for change with compelling circumstances and experiences that necessitate movement. As the lunar south node transits Scorpio, circumstances and events will expose the mental and emotional imbalances that have been fragmented off and hidden in our subconscious. What we have done in order to maintain our sense of security and safety. It will expose the cultural and ancestral conditioning that has been buried in our collective psyche for decades, centuries, and in some cases, millennia. Waiting to be discovered in those shadows are new priorities for renewal. At the nodal ingress, Venus retrograde becomes the ruler of the lunar north node. Though the Venus retrograde cycle will end 2 weeks later, this retrograde condition will format the entire 18-month nodal transit. As the inner directed yin expression of relationship goddess Venus, Taurus correlates to our relationship with ourselves. It is the quotient of our self-esteem and our self-worth. Astrologically, Venus correlates to magnetism. Taurus magnetizes us to what is essential for our survival. The lunar north node carries the sole directive of what we need in order to evolve. A dramatic transformation is underway that is changing the way we understand ourselves and our society. Who have we become? Who are we becoming? What are the values that we profess and adhere to? What are the collective and individual priorities that we practice or ignore? Our relationship with ourselves, our self-esteem, and our sense of self-worth will all come under review. A new cycle begins at all our relationships with others and with ourselves. Values and their priorities will be reviewed. Relationships have potential for restructure, especially our intimate relationships. We can grow our relationships in a positive way, becoming more responsible to our own needs at the same time establishing equilibrium with the needs of others. A recurring theme will be the examination of what is essential individually and collectively for body, mind, and spirit. At the nodal ingress, a fixed grand cross is formed. Collective shadows are exposed. Emotional crises trigger self-narratives that encourage the individual process of becoming and awaken the need for proactive self-care. Jupiter in Pisces squares the lunar nodes at the ingress. The transition occurs from restless lunar Sagittarius to cosmically connected Pisces. Universal truth replaces personal truth. Circumstances and events compel the understanding that we are inexorably connected to that which is greater than ourselves. Currently, the US Pluto return and the US Neptune opposition are occurring simultaneously. I used the Revolutionary War chart of the United States, cast for July 6, 1775. On that day, the Second Continental Congress passed an act to bear arms against Great Britain. An act was also passed the day before that established a standing army and named George Washington as commander-in-chief. Is it not true that when a colony declares war on its mother country, that colony severs all political and economic ties, ceases to be a colony and becomes a sovereign nation? Up until that time, the skirmishes at Concord and Lexington had been defensive actions in response to British incursions on American soil. On July 6, 1775, at 11:05 a.m. local mean time in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the 13 American colonies became the United States of America. Perhaps July 4th, 1776 was the country's first birthday. The colonies had survived a year of warfare with the most powerful military force on the planet. The founding fathers could finally announce to the world that the 13 American colonies were now a free and independent state. It would take another 90 years and a bloody civil war as Americans battled against Americans for the diverse aggregate of states to become united. It's a little known fact that more American soldiers died at Gettysburg than on D-Day. Revolutionary War, Pluto was in the sign of Capricorn, its current transit. Neptune was in the sign of Virgo. Neptune is now transiting Pisces, Virgo's polarity. Pluto has recently returned to the degree where it was when the United States was born. Transiting Pluto has been in orb of US Pluto since January of 2019. It will remain in orb until December 2024. In 2021, 3 perfections occurred to US Pluto by transiting Pluto on February 18th, July 10th, and on December 25th. Pluto and Neptune move very slowly. The cycle of Pluto is 248 years. The cycle of Neptune is 156 years. The orb of these transits extends from 8 to 9 years. Each version of the US chart offers different dates for the perfections that are all just about a year apart. Regardless of the chart consulted, we are in the midst of the pinnacle period in US history. And I don't claim that this is the only chart of the United States. Astrology works, so all astrology works. According to the Revolutionary War chart, the first Pluto return occurred 5 weeks after the January 6th Capitol riot. The second Pluto return coincided with the formation of the January 6th Commission, today's anniversary, to investigate the details of the Capitol riot. As we move through the last conjunction, Congress and multiple state attorney generals and federal courts are investigating Donald Trump for interfering with the 2020 election, the peaceful transfer of power, and for tax fraud. Many of his former allies and staff and family have been called before the January 6th Commission to give testimony. So far, he has thrown up every legal roadblock to divert due process of law. Donald Trump has never displayed any respect for the rule of law. How can we expect him to comply and surrender for his alleged crimes should he be indicted? It's my belief that he is actively seeking options to find political asylum beyond the reach of the US judicial system. His minions will perceive his demise, correlating to his natal 10th house Sun-Uranus lunar north node conjunction, as martyrdom. A martyr consolidates much more power than a defeated political figure. Transiting Neptune has been in orb of US Neptune since February of 2019. Neptune is about belief systems. The last US Neptune opposition occurred from 1854 to 1860, the years leading up to the war between the states. In those years, abolitionists faced off against anti-abolitionists. At the end of the Civil War, the Emancipation Proclamation freed all the Southern slaves. It did not free slaves outside of the Confederacy, nor did it make Negroes equal citizens of the United States. Reconstruction attempted to correct the inequities of slavery, but it failed to heal the wounds of the bloodiest conflict in American history. Over the next century, slavery was institutionalized as segregation. The cry heard was the South shall rise again. This prophecy has come to pass, evidenced on the steps and halls of the US Capitol on January 6, 2021. Pluto is about power. In 1775, power was transferred from England to the American colonies. Capricorn is about authority. It is about repression and suppression. There is a large segment of the US population who believe that the vaccination represents authoritative control, and they are defiant in their resistance to getting vaccinated. In the meantime, COVID continues to mutate, creating increasingly infectious variants. Regardless of whether there is an active agenda for control, the science stands on its own. It's now a year since the insurrection occurred. The former president of the United States has been implicated, along with the members of his staff and elected members of Congress, in a coup that attempted to derail the electoral process and subvert the will of the American people. Today, on the anniversary of the Capitol insurrection, President Joe Biden condemned Donald Trump for instigating the riot. The time we are passing through astrologically mirrors the Revolution and the Civil War at the same time. History does not repeat, but it rhymes. What will be the nature of the restructuring of political power in the United States? Will the rule of law survive the onslaught from the powerfully structured ultra-right wing? Will the Supreme Court support 250 years of judicial precedent? Will the elected officials, who many believe committed treason and sedition, be arrested and persecuted? Will there be another coup attempt? Will we have to experience another civil war in order for the divisions of our country to be resolved? What we need to understand is where these crises are leading us. The late Native American author, Jamie Sams, wrote in Other Council Fires Were Here Before Ours that 3 worlds have existed before this one. Native American mythology says that this is the 4th world. We know about at least one of these lost worlds from the story of Noah's Ark. According to Native American prophecy, there have been others. The mysterious, remarkable stone monuments are erected along the ley lines of the earth: the Sphinx, the Great Pyramid, Göbekli Tepe, Stonehenge, Chaco Canyon, the Great Wall of China, Machu Picchu, and others are evidence of advanced civilizations and golden ages that preceded our time. Several hundred years ago, around the time of the discovery of Uranus in the American and French revolutions, progressive, more enlightened political agendas began to spread, and our world turned a corner with the return back toward what the Hindus called Satya Yuga, the age of truth. The Hopi say that this time the 4th world will not be completely destroyed. This time the 5th world will emerge even as the 4th world disappears. If we gaze with our inner vision and we open our hearts to see the greatest potential of human endeavor, we might just catch a glimpse. Another world is not only possible, she's on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. This presentation is just the short version of my 147-page astrological weather report for the year that I've just published on Amazon. It's available as an ebook and paperbook. I encourage you to read the entire comprehensive and detailed forecast. The book is better than the movie. This is how you can learn more about my work and how to reach me. I thank you all for listening, for being here. Namaste. I wish you all joy and peace, kindness, and blessings for the new year. Namaste.